Different reports from international also local organizations are saying that in Montenegro there were huge groups of organized crime. What is your impression? Was this true? And from your experience, how many organized crime groups were established after Yugoslavia fell in Montenegro?
Well, Montenegro was making international headlines and serious international reports about connections of state actors and organized crime groups even since the early 90s, during the war in Yugoslavia. So, if you remember, first of all, there was a big organized crime group, and it was proven to be connected with the state actors and government back then, connected with Italian mafia about tobacco smuggling across the Adriatic Sea. The so-called revenue, but the earnings from that tobacco smuggling helped Montenegro government even in the mid-90s to fund some pensions, salaries, medicine suppliers in the 90s during the sanctions and the war. Unfortunately, journalists, civil society organizations expected back then in late 90s that after the war, especially war in Kosovo is ended, and the region has started returning to some normal atmosphere, that this type of organized crime group will disappear or fade away in Montenegro. But that never happened. Just after the war in Kosovo and NATO bombing has ended, we in media, I was a young journalist back then, start hearing rumors about Montenegrin citizens being involved in huge transatlantic smuggling of drugs, meaning cocaine. In parallel with that, there were some reports, media reports. Occasionally, police were doing something or some prosecution investigation involving Montenegrin citizens in arms smuggling and other type of serious organized crimes. But starting in 2004, 2005, we as journalists and civil society organizations here become aware of creation of a big, first of all, Montenegrin, and which later become a regional smuggling gang. Maybe your audience will remember news reports everywhere about the seizure, about tons of cocaine in European ports, or in Latin America, the so-called Kavač and Škaljari clan. So unfortunately, Montenegro in the past 10 years become notorious, like a famous destination when everyone who came here knows about these links and about these big two gangs smuggling cocaine from Latin America. Not only smuggling, apparently based on some reports and these transcripts that are received from Europol in Sky crypto communication, they were not only smuggling, they were actually producing cocaine together with Latin America drug gangs there. So they were like Montenegrins very prominent even in Latin America. But what we realized also in the past 10 years, as journalists, as someone who was reporting about that, investigating, that the state borders do not work for organized crime. So whatever politicians are presenting, or you see like a border crossing or some restrictions, that doesn't work for organized crime. There are no borders for them. So we witnessed, like journalists here, like you in Kosovo, like journalists in Serbia or Bosnia, that our organized crime is regional. So when there are some huge busts, arrests of smuggling gangs, you see Serbs and Albanians there, and Serbs and Bosniaks, and Montenegrin and Croats. So there are no borders, official state borders for organized crime.
These groups that were smuggling tons of cocaine, tons of cigarettes, they created a huge income for their members. Where did the money go?
Well, there are speculations and something that is still in the phase of research or investigation of local journalists or international journalists, saying that just a small portion of that money ended up in Montenegro through some money laundering channels. That some of the gangs members, like high-profile gangs members, were basically money laundering a majority of that revenue in European Union countries, in recent years in cryptocurrencies. So that's a paradox that in this small country we never saw a big influx of that type of money or cash that was that visible in money laundering here. Yes, there are examples. There are also suspicious that some of the earnings from smuggling ended up especially on the coast, like big complexes or fancy resorts or restaurants, but lack of evidence is the problem for that. Mostly we can only suspect that ended up here.
There are a lot of analysts and also reports that are saying that this money was most of the time being invested in constructions and also in sightseeing resources like hotels and things like that.
Do you know what is the problem? It's pretty much the same like in Kosovo, like in Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, everywhere. The capacities of police and prosecution are weak, even when there is a political will in some of the country to investigate that, to prosecute that type of serious crime and money laundering or illegal financial flows. We don't have indictments, we don't have trials, and we don't have final verdicts. So the only thing what we can say is for some cases that are proved, mostly proved by NGOs and investigative journalists, like in Kosovo, but we don't have verdicts. So we don't know whether some of the projects, big projects in construction, in tourism, in hospitality, even in agriculture, what is the origin of the money? We have suspicions, we have speculations, but until we have final verdicts, we cannot say for sure that this is the problem.
We are talking about groups that are based in Montenegro, that huge organized crime group. Is there any chance that the money from this group, they have been invested in the past in Kosovo or can be invested in the future in Kosovo in this kind of companies like construction or in restaurants or in resources and things like that?
Well, as I mentioned previously, there are no borders, like administrative borders for organized crime. So whenever there is an interesting project, actually, where there is an opportunity to money launder, it doesn't matter whether it's Albania or Kosovo or Serbia or Montenegro. Yes, to answer your question very directly, yes, there is a possibility, not that it might end up in Kosovo, that it already end up in Kosovo in some of the projects.
And if we will talk about the impact that money laundering is having to states, to the countries, do you believe that having this money in Montenegro, it helped developing Montenegro or damaging it?
What we are witnessing, especially in the past 5-6 years during the COVID, but previously, because I would just remind you that beside having these organized crime groups that are originally from Montenegro or regionally from these neighboring countries, Montenegro was also in the middle of lots of international reports about being a safe haven for money laundering from Russians, from some Gulf states, from Arabs, from some Turkish shady businessmen. So apparently, according to some estimates, tens of billions of euros were money laundered through Montenegro, mostly in construction and real estate. And what is the first, for example, outcome? That the prices of a real estate, especially in the coast, are like in Monaco, like in French Riviera. That's not a real value. Come on, we cannot not compare French Riviera and prices in Montenegro. Last summer, there was like reports and real estate agencies were advertising that the 1 square meter in the apartment in Tivat Bay was 10,000 euros, 1 square meter, or 14,000 euros. So some NGOs were doing actually serious reports here saying that this is the best way to money launder this type of money, through these type of transactions in real estate, boosting up the prices of the real estate.
And what kind of impact is having this to the local citizens? Are they becoming more rich or more poor? Because the life conditions are changing. You cannot buy these apartments, and you cannot live in this kind of zones.
Well, to start with this small positive impact, just for the sake of objectivity, in coastal towns, but also in other places of Montenegro, where we witnessed this boom in construction, there is some improvement in terms of economy and creating a small amount of new workplaces, like jobs, but that's just small percentage. Yes, in Tivat, in Budva, in Ulcinj, like new bars, new restaurants, or some taxi service on a small scale. But I can tell you that I cannot afford, as someone born and raised in Montenegro, born actually on the coast, I cannot afford not to own real estate, to spend 7 days there in summer. So now Montenegrins, because it's so crazy expensive, because of that irrational growth, Montenegrins are going to Albania, to Greece, to Turkey for summer vacation because they cannot afford Montenegrin cost.
So it's making people more poor.
Exactly, exactly. That's the truth.
And also, a lot of people in the Balkan, they believe that creating an environment that is allowing money laundering, it's a good opportunity to develop our countries. If you are saying that Montenegro has not this kind of experience.
I'm not sure that I understand the logic of these people, but I heard it before that injecting even irregular money, like money from smuggling, that will create some economic development. No, it will not. It will not, because that's not a realistic growth. That's not a realistic economic growth that is based on real parameters. That's not growth in industries, in hospitality, which is based on law and regulation and real growth. So it will create corruption, nepotism, links between state and crime. This is what we witnessed. Come on, we live in this 50 kilometers apart, Albania, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia. We see with our own eyes that in past 20 years, there is no real growth, which is on realistic grounds because of that money. So this is what creates, making us poor and making the state poor, like the state budget.
We are witnessing that organized crime is real. It's happening in Balkan region, and we see that the data is showing us that in Montenegro we have just a few cases of investigating money laundering. In Albania, just a few cases. In Kosovo, a few cases. Do you believe that there is no will to start doing some actions, some real actions on stopping this and investigating what happened in the past?
First of all, I believe that there is no political will, which stating the obvious, we know that. But sometimes, in some small percentage of cases when there is a political will, where it involves someone who is not supporter of the ruling party, any ruling party in any countries. What I'm also concerned as a journalist, that there are no capacities of law enforcement, like police and prosecution, to investigate that. And this is what, for example, the EU progress reports, both for Kosovo and Montenegro, are highlighting the capacities. Recently, I was attending some regional conference about organized crime in cybersphere. So developed countries in EU, also Israel, which is very known of that, now investing millions in training their prosecutors in tracking money laundering and organized crime in digital sphere, through crypto, through different blockchain activities. And you know that as a journalist, we know that organized crime in this region is much more advanced than our law enforcement in terms of using modern technologies, being imaginative, how to money laundering. So our police and prosecutions are constantly lagging out in these modern trends, how to investigate, especially money laundering, which is a very complex prosecutorial-like operation. So to cut it short, even when there is a political will, in some percentage of the cases, I think they don't have capacities.